Hello and welcome to week 6 in Sociology and Technology. And here we are, chapter 6, looking at communication and how changes in our communication standards and technology have certainly shaped our world. So one of the things that I introduce you to is probably a common core idea about the effect of technology on communication, and that is transactional distance, which is a term we describe that you get from communication, the world of communication, and it describes the feeling of closeness to the person that you are communicating with. Now, before technology, when communication was really just face to face, we could say the immediacy of that is very, very fast. So very, very short transactional distance. If I said something in a face-to-face conversation that made the person maybe angry at me or something, I'd be able to know that within a split second. I'd say something in their facial expressions. That transactional process happens extremely rapidly when you're in a face-to-face. And that's really the benefit of face-to-face interactions. Whenever we insert technology into that, we are increasing transactional distance. We're making the people figuratively move further apart. So if you think about when you're going to do something on a telephone, not only is there more actual physical distance, using a telephone, but there's also some aspects of our feedback systems that are restricted. We don't see the person's facial expressions. We just hear their tone of voice. Then when you look at video chat, one of the real advantages of video communication or two-way video communication is you can see and hear. But there's still technology in between there. There's still delays. There's still the false situation which someone is in, let alone you start adding emails or discussion boards, whatnot, all that. You really start going out to maybe the furthest one out there, letter writing, which also comes from the older times here, people writing letters and sending them off, and you don't get the response for weeks, maybe months at a time, and that's all measures of transactional distance. And it impacts the sense of community and belongingness that a person would feel in that interaction. And so my dissertation actually focused on a sense of community that students feel in an online learning environment. And one of the factors that we explored was transactional distance. So different types of technology create different types of transactional distance, and therefore, for lack of better terms, have different degrees of warm and fuzzy. And does it matter? That was ultimately what I looked at was, does feeling connected socially because of efforts to reduce transactional distance, does it have an effect on grades? It didn't. It didn't have an effect on grades, but it did have an effect on a person's satisfaction with the class and the likelihood of them taking another online class, which of course are important administrative concerns. Didn't affect learning per se, but it did affect satisfaction. So that it's an important part of online learning, important part of all levels of communication. And as we embrace different technologies for communication, we insert the idea of transactional distance. So I want you to give some big and small, what are some situations you've been in where you felt there's been a lot of transactional distance, and other situations where you feel that there has not been. It might even be interesting, for example, let's say you're going to maybe compare two courses, the same technology, but one, the instructor was hardly ever there, and it was really hard to know whether that person was there. And then the other one, it seemed like, everything was sort of immediate, and you had a better sense that you weren't alone in that virtual classroom. That's how people might experience that. But you can use any examples that you want. It doesn't have to be online learning. So that's our discussion. And then I introduced you to a concept that I researched at Boise State University, which is the notion of hot and cold media. And it has to do with the degree of social transaction that's happening. Cold media, very straightforward text. Hot media, very interactive. Those kinds of things. So that's another dimension. Particularly at the time I was working on that stuff, there was a lot of interactive educational tools that were under development. And so gamification of things and highly intensive, engaging sort of activities, and that'd be very hot media and videos, and then of course not just media, but like doing internships and those kinds of things. Those are very hot, very live, very emotionally, very different than reading a book. All of them are important. That whole gamut of different things is important, and you learn different things in those places. You need the book knowledge in order to apply to that hot situation when you're in an internship. So those kinds of different experiences. So in the quiz, I would like you to think about experiences of cold media, as I define it, hot media, and then contrast them. When is each one good, and when would you actually want it to be something different? Maybe there's a situation you might be in where it's very interactive, but I don't have enough instructions. I want a little bit of cold media to help with this. And then there's other times where I'm learning something, but I'd really like something maybe more hands-on or interactive, get my head wrapped around this material. So thinking about that in terms of your learning process. And finally, I've added another tangle. So this time, because we're looking at communication, I went back a little bit of time, the beginning of February, when Saul published a newsletter on the hearings that happened with all the large social media CEOs met with Congress and were pushed with questions about the negative impact of social media and what are they doing to protect children from predators on there, and reading those kinds of things. And we're really looking at a situation in which because of the kind of country we are, we really rely on those with the possession of that technology to self-monitor. And we're struggling with the idea of decisions being made in these social media places where there's billions of dollars at hand, and what's the driving force of those decisions? Is the safety of the users? Is it the profitability? Should the user beware? If you want to use our platform, go ahead, but you might get hurt. Where is the responsibility? Where is the culpability in terms of things that happen online? And I found it an interesting sort of one event that he reports out on, gives the left, right, and then his take on things. And I just think it's a nice place for us to discuss not only the idea of communicating online through social media, which is, germane to what we're talking about this week, but what role does regulation play in there, and how does that fit up against freedom of speech? And, these are extremely, extremely hot topics going on right now. These are constitutional questions coming up because of technology. And the influence that technology has. It's not just that people can do it anonymously or it's how ubiquitous this stuff is. It's how many people are actually using these tools and how influential those tools can be on individuals' lives and their decision making. So very, very important stuff for us to consider here. And I'd like you to go in there, put your thoughts in there. What social media channels do you use? What do you think about what happened in that hearing? Maybe do some background research on it. What has happened? What regulations are they working out? Are they all just trying to sell us a bag of goods and they're going to just try and make as much money as they can out of us? What are they doing with our data? All of that stuff. Let's take a deep dive into there, get into that rich discussion, and probably not sufficient to say, well, I don't participate, so it's not a big deal. Well, it's a big deal in our world, and in this class, I like to have you engage in, well, how can you have an opinion, even though it doesn't affect you personally? Do some research. So if somebody ever asked you, your answer wouldn't simply be, I don't use it. It would be, here's why, and here's my concerns. You become a knowledgeable individual about this. So that's what I'm looking for in these discussions on Tangle. Just kind of get the different says on things, and make sure you look at both left and right and read them all through. It does a tremendous job of like looking at the polarity, and sometimes where there's not really a whole lot of polarity in the opinions, left-right opinions on these topics. So enjoy these. Have a great week. I will see you in the discussions, and take care.